Alchemy first appears in Muslim-ruled lands in the 8th century, with its origins generally traced to late antique Egyptian and Greek-speaking contexts, something Arab authors themselves often acknowledged. Here, however, the historian runs into a difficulty. The 8th century marked the start of the so-called translation movement, supported by the early Abbasid caliphs in Baghdad, during which Greek texts, often via Syriac, were rendered into Arabic. This process is well documented in the case of texts by Aristotle, Galen, and Hippocrates, but sources on the translation of Greek alchemical texts are sparse. Now, the reasons are unclear. It may reflect the secretive nature of alchemy, transmitted privately from master to student, or the fact that it was never part of any formal curriculum. Despite the limited evidence, it's clear that Greek alchemical writings reached Arabic readers through direct translation, paraphrase, and epitome. One of the earliest Greek authors to be translated was Zosimus of Panopolis, who we just heard about. While some Arabic texts can confidently be traced to him, others have only been indirectly authenticated, and some remain in a grey area between genuine and spurious. The Tome of the Art and Tome of Images, for example, are framed as dialogues, fictional dialogues, between Zosimus and the female alchemist Theosebea, a key figure in Zosimus's authentic works. These offered valuable insights to medieval Arabic writers about the sayings of other Greek alchemists such as Ostanes, Pseudo-Democritus, and Maria the Jewess. Other Greco-Egyptian and Byzantine figures found in Arabic sources include Agathodaimon, Pelagios, Christianos, An-Nasrani in Arabic, and Stephanos, possibly Stephanos of Alexandria, though it remains unclear whether these works were based on Greek originals or were later attributions. Forgeries inspired by real historical figures were commonplace in Arabic alchemical literature. Legendary narratives, though offering little historical data, served as key vehicles for imagining the origins of alchemy in Muslim lands. Early Muslim authors commonly attributed the origins of alchemy to the antediluvian sage Hermes Trismegistus. The 10th century bibliographer Ibn Nadim lists 13 books linked to Hermes, many with pseudo-Greek titles. These works later form part of the cycle known as the pseudo-Aristotelian Hermetica, often framed as dialogues between Alexander the Great and his famous teacher Aristotle about Hermes's revealed wisdom. Other legends featured Christian monks passing on esoteric knowledge to worthy disciples. Of note is the historical Umayyad prince Khalid ibn Yazid, who died in 708, and the entirely fictional account of his tutelage under the Christian monk Marianus. This gave some Arab writers the impression that Greek alchemy entered Arabic far earlier than it actually did. Numerous Arabic works are attributed to Khalid, though similar associations appear with other royal figures, likely to bolster alchemy's public image. One of them is the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius, who reigned from 610 to 641, to whom is attributed dialogues in question and answer form. Moreover, a chronicle by Ibn al-Faqih al-Hamadani, who flourished in 902 of the Common Era, includes an account by an envoy of the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur, who reigned between 750 and 754, describing a visit to Constantinople. There, the Byzantine emperor allegedly displayed wonders such as steam-driven automata and elixirs capable of transmuting copper into gold and lead into silver. The narrator concludes that the Caliph al-Mansur took an interest in alchemy only after learning of such marvels. While there is no evidence for the historicity of this story, it reflects how medieval Arabic authors imagined the transmission of alchemy into their thought world. Just as importantly, it shows that alchemy, like automata, was seen as a form of technological marvel. Alchemy often intersected with other scientific disciplines. While alchemists were certainly interested in the nature of matter, their engagement with the broader sciences was fluid and eclectic from the start. Early Arabic alchemy drew on multiple intellectual traditions, an approach that continued to evolve in new directions throughout the Middle Ages. One example is the Mercury-sulfur theory of metals, which became a cornerstone of alchemical thought. One early articulation appears in the Sirrul Khaliqa, The Secret of Creation, a 9th century work attributed to Apollonius of Tyana, most famous for its emerald tablet legend, which we're going to hear about shortly from Dr. Forshaw. This work describes how metals form underground when mercury absorbs sulfur and is transformed through heat. As dryness overtakes internal softness, the metal responds by manifesting softness onto its surface, producing lead as the first fusible metal, followed by tin, copper, and others, according to varying mercury-sulfur ratios. Though not an alchemical treatise per se, The Secret of Creation lays the foundations for later theories of transmutation. It does this by presenting the idea that all metals begin as potential gold, but are altered by accidental factors, affecting properties like color, smell, and taste, though not their underlying substance. Thus, all metals are essentially gold, transformed only by external accidents. This theory underpins the Jābirian corpus, a body of texts attributed to the Iraqi alchemist Jābir ibn Ḥayyān, known as Geber in the West, and have traditionally been dated between the 8th and 10th centuries. In the Kitab al-Idah, Jābir explains that all metals form through the mingling of mercury and sulfur, shaped by varying heat and moisture. Refined sulfur produces gold, refined mercury yields silver, while imbalance results in base metals. Jābir's key innovation is to extend this model to the laboratory. Just as nature imperfectly forms metals, the alchemist can perfect them by restoring their balance. Metals, he argues, begin as potential gold but are diverted by impurities. The alchemist's task then is to recreate the conditions that would have completed their transformation into gold. This involves drawing out their latent goldness, much like processing wax from honey, which was thought to exist within it in a state of potentiality. Now, time doesn't permit me into going into the details of what this process actually looked like. That was a matter of huge debate and a process guided as much by practice and observation as by texts. However, it's worth mentioning one debate that would dominate alchemical discourse for centuries, the prima materia of the transmuting agent known as the elixir, the philosopher's stone, and many other names. While most alchemists broadly agreed on the function of the elixir, they disagreed over its composition. The Jābirian corpus insists that animal substances were the most noble and effective in yielding this chemical agent. Such organic material broke down far more easily than minerals through distillation, allowing their qualities to be extracted and applied to metals. However, Jābir leaves us in the dark as to what animal substances these are, referring only to the elixir by its deknamen, cover names, rumuz in Arabic, symbols. A later alchemist, the 10th century Abu Bakr al-Razi, known as Rassis in the Latin West, specified such animal stones as hair, brain, blood, eggs, milk, horn, and others. This makes sense since when hair or crania is distilled, it produces quicklime, which can be used to break down metals through calcination, a process that can sometimes be more manageable than using chalk or marble. Similarly, distilled urine yields phosphorus, which can be used to break down metals through combustion. By contrast, the 10th century alchemist Muhammad ibn Umayl, known in the West as Senior Zadith, rejected animal ingredients entirely, arguing that alchemists had misunderstood the symbolic language of the ancient Egyptian priests. He maintained that the elixir must share the nature of the substance it transforms, just as plant seed affects only its own species. With its nutritive spirit, the elixir nourishes the metal, implying that it too must be metallic in essence. Again, we can go back to interpretations of the secret of creation. Recall that this work posits that all metals have their origin in Mercury, only later pairing with sulfur. As such, in order to restore metals to their original nature, which is gold, a mineral rather than organic principle must underlie this process. Now, abstruse as these debates may seem, they had a wider intellectual and societal impact. While alchemists often disagreed among themselves, the craft also faced external criticism. Most notably from the Aristotelian philosopher Ibn Sina, who died in 1037, known in the West as Avicenna. Avicenna denied that the species of metals could be altered artificially, since species are immutable and inaccessible to the human senses. Alchemists, he argued, could only change a metal's outward appearance and properties. His critique became a cornerstone of Avicennan philosophy and was expanded by his followers in later centuries. However, alchemy also attracted moral criticism. The most common charge was deception and greed. But more intriguing of a critique comes from the philosopher and physician Laṭīf al Baghdādī, who died in 1231. A former alchemist himself, he later renounced the discipline and composed a refutation in the form of a dialogue between an Avicennan philosopher and an alchemist, effectively a conversation with his former self. Responding to the claim that alchemists are uniquely judicious, the philosopher counters that even the most intelligent can fall for the false promise of unlimited gold. He relates an anecdote about a legal scholar duped by an Egyptian who claimed the philosopher's stone could be derived from urine. The scholar began collecting jars of it and leaving them in the sun to the display of his neighbors who complained about the foul stench. Another tale involves a Baghdadi saddler who buried a flask of mixtures in manure, standard alchemical practice, but was badly injured when it exploded in his face. More gruesome is a story from the aftermath of a battle in Palestine, in Marja'aka, where alchemists were said to have plucked the eyeballs from the skulls of dead crusaders, believing them key to making the philosopher's stone. Now, these stories are clearly meant to amuse and scandalize, but they likely contain elements of truth. As noted, alchemists frequently used organic substances, something that sparked debate among both critics and practitioners. So I want to turn now quickly to the question of alchemy and Islam as a religion, particularly religious debate over its permissibility. It's important to note that at the outset, from the outset, that there was no single centrally defined orthodoxy in the medieval Islamic world. As such, it is difficult to generalize about Islam's stance on the craft. One well-known critic was the jurist Ibn Taymiyyah, who issued a fatwa condemning alchemy as a form of financial fraud. Yet such views were not universally held, even among religious scholars. One such religious scholar was Fakhreddin al-Razi, who dies in 1209, different from the Razi I mentioned earlier, who remains one of the most influential Sunni theologians. Though strongly influenced by Avicenna, he rejected Avicenna's refutation of alchemy. Whereas Avicenna argued that the species of a substance is unknowable and unchangeable, al-Razi held that a substance's effects arise from its composition, not its essence. He compares this to the medicinal plant euphorbia, whose heat is intrinsic rather than externally imposed, just as a base metal's potential to become gold lies latent within it. And I'll end there. Sorry about that. Thank you very much.
You ended with saying that alchemy had some impact on Islam, for and against, so it certainly permeated the religion. Did it have a lasting and important impact, would you say?
Absolutely, in ways that reverberate across history. So, for example, the Jābirian corpus that I mentioned earlier is infused with Shia Muslim imagery and associations. So Jābir ibn Ḥayyān, this influential Arab alchemist, was said to have been, or rather reputed to have been, we don't know for sure, a companion of the 6th Shia Imam Jaʿfar al Ṣādiq, who was one of the successors of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. And even the language of alchemy, this language of concealment and manifestation, is very linked to Islamic esotericism when it comes to, say, unraveling hidden meaning in the Quran.
So we have the Islamic esotericism, because religion in general is something you would like to spread to so many as possible. And you say alchemy is a cult, keeping secrets only to the few who are in the cult. But then we have this in-between, the esotericism.
Yes, and it's also historical accidents. The Jābirian corpus tended to be circulated in Shia circles. So these religious associations could often be added onto the corpus by later hands. And very much a byproduct of the culture in which it circulated, so it shouldn't surprise us.
Could I also ask you about this translation movement in the 8th century? What was the purpose? Was it just the joy of translating or finding knowledge from the past, including alchemy?
There are many theories as to why this happened. Traditionally, it was because the caliphs decreed that these Greek texts should be translated. So it was royal patronage. More recent historians have shown that this enterprise of translation was already present in the Middle East in late antiquity, where you had translation of Greek texts into Syriac, particularly those logical texts by Aristotle, for example. But it was also a cottage industry. Many famous thinkers made their living by translating these texts.
And we have reason to be thankful that this took place. Otherwise,
indeed, yeah. But I should just say very quickly and perhaps parenthetically that when we're talking about alchemy, it's very hard to establish what is the product of direct translation from Greek. What you do get, and I did mention this, is a lot of pseudo translation, a text purporting to have been translated from Greek, belonging to an ancient author, but is in fact a contemporary forgery by an Arab writer. And this is part of the genre.
No. Thank you very much. Thank you.